So, thank you for the introduction. Good news is I have a 45-minute answer to the question around safe space, which is the last question. But I'll make it interactive. If I just talk, probably not the best thing before lunch. So, what I want you to do, actually, to get us started, is I'm going to talk about leading the Invincible company. Invincible companies are companies that constantly reinvent themselves. Constantly. So I want you to discuss, in groups of two, so maybe you turn to your left, to the right, or to the back, I want you to discuss, just for 30 seconds, if you were an anthropologist and you looked at companies like Amazon, Ping An, invincible companies that constantly reinvent themselves, what would you see as the three main characteristics? Okay? How do you detect an invincible company? 30 seconds to discuss. Let's go. Let's get started with a little bit of interaction. Okay. Let's continue together. Let's continue together. Obviously, I get you started on an interesting question. It's hard to get you to calm down again. So, my view, I'll give you a bit my view on how you build an invincible company. I believe any company, small or big, can act like Amazon. If we take the innovation part, there are other things from Amazon you shouldn't copy, right? But when it comes to innovation, Amazon is world class. So let me show you the two things that we need to be good at in invincible companies. And the first thing, actually, every company had, because every company, doesn't matter how old you are, Nestle, 150 years, started out as a startup, one day, okay? Nestle, 150 years old, so they're not a startup anymore. But when you innovate, you actually need to behave like a startup. And what does that mean? Let me draw this here. You're exploring. You're not executing an idea. You're exploring until you find what can actually work. So the most important thing when you're an explorer is to admit that uncertainty and risk is at its maximum. You need to admit you have no clue if this new idea is going to work. No clue. In how many companies, established companies, can you go to the boss, if you're not the boss, and say, hey, I have this amazing idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but give me 100,000 euro, 500,000 euro, a million to explore. What's going to happen? No, thank you. No, I don't want to take that risk, right? Return on investment. Show me that it can work. But the problem is, we ask for, what do we usually ask for when we ask is show me that it can work? We ask for a business plan, right? Business plan, PowerPoint, and a wonderful spreadsheet with numbers that look great on paper. Turns out, a business plan is the best way to maximize failure, to increase the risk you're going to invest in a stupid idea. Wow! And most established companies in innovation still ask for business plans. So I'm not against business plans. I'm against business plans in the early stage of innovation. Why? Because we'll make an idea look beautiful. We'll make it so beautiful that we actually think it can only work. Who's ever been in a presentation where somebody, maybe even a startup, presented wonderful slides, a great spreadsheet with wonderful projections that looked so good that you had no doubt that's going to work? Who's ever seen a presentation like that? Okay? And then it turns out it bombs. Because you made up the numbers, you made up the idea. You refined a fantasy when you should have done something else. And that something else is test your idea and adapt it and reduce risk and uncertainty. That's your only task in innovation. Take an idea, ideas are overrated, they're everywhere, they're free, and constantly adapt it in a search for a value proposition that creates value for customers and a business model that can scale. Okay? Not a business plan. Who of you has ever written a business plan in this room? Okay? So that was a waste of time. If it was for innovation. So what we need is to behave a lot more like startups inside of companies. Okay? I'll get back to this in a second. So then once you found that business model and you scaled it, right? Nestle started out with condensed milk. You actually move into a new world. The world of exploitation of a proven business model And all you do, which is a different type of hard, it's hard as well, is you manage the existing. So you now have this dual world, exploration and exploitation. The challenge is that most companies today, they're actually world-class at this. Better processes, you try to eliminate risk, and that's okay, that's good, that's not bad. Cost cutting to get more efficient. The problem is you can't cost cut yourself into the next century. You need to reinvent yourself. Because a lot of business models are dying. If you only focus on innovation to improve your existing business model, you're going to more efficiently die. Okay, it's as simple as that. What we need is to recreate, in many cases, recreate an exploration culture. Not one better than the other, it's and. And here, you need to create a safe space for exploration. Here you need a safe space as well for managing the existing. It's a different kind of safe space. How do you create this over here? Different culture, different metrics, different skills. It's a different world, if not a different planet. But they need to coexist, okay? That's the key word. And in academia, and we've been talking about the ambidextrous culture for a long time, but I think it's time to implement this in more organizations, okay? So this is the ambidextrous organization, creating a balance between exploitation and exploration. And I think today the balance is a lot more towards exploitation. Who would agree with that statement? A lot more focus on exploitation. And sometimes it's hard because, short-term focus, stock market, etc. So we came up with a tool that we call the business portfolio map. So we can explore both worlds and manage both worlds. What this means is a portfolio of your existing businesses, you're going to look at it on the axis of profitability, and you're going to look at it on the axis of disruption risk. How likely is your business to die? Okay? The higher the risk, the more you should probably reinvent yourself. Over here, same thing, but this is now expected return. Great idea, could make a lot of money, but guess what? There's also a risk of exploring a stupid idea. So you need to test yourself to prove that the idea can work, okay? Ambidextrous. Good, let's look at this first, the exploitation world. Zoom into this for a second, because there's a lot you can already do here, okay? A lot you can do here. And what I would like us to think of is how can we act in this space? So there's basically three main actions. One is to fix the business models you have, improve them in a small way, minor way, or a substantial way. I'll get to that in a second. One thing that CEOs like to do a lot is acquisition. That's great. Not all acquisitions work out, but we kind of know how to do that. But I'll show you that you make better acquisitions if you're a good explorer. And the last one, of course, sometimes we need to divest. And this is something, take the example we heard Fujifilm as the counterexample to Kodak this morning from Philip Kotler, right? What Kodak didn't do is divest early enough. While Fujifilm did that and actually invented, so they did more down here, what we'll see in a second, a completely new technology business. So a good example of fixing to go from a dying business model to a good one again, is what we call business model shifts. One of my favorite examples is Hilti. Who of you has heard of Hilti? Okay, machine tools for builders, but a famous brand apparently because most of you know it. They went from a manufacturing company, building tools that they sold and were very successful over decades. They shifted to a service company that offers online fleet rental of tools, so they took away the big pain of having to make an upfront investment, and they managed the entire tool fleet for the construction companies. Right tool, right place, right time. Okay, so they shifted from products to service. That's a big shift. Some companies shift from selling to platform. Think of the iPhone. That was actually a big shift for Apple from selling stuff, phones, towards becoming a platform with the App Store and applications. That's the hard part to disrupt. Anybody today can make phones, but there are only two ecosystems, if you want, with application developers. That's iOS and Android, okay? So those are shifts. Now, what I want to look at, because this is the hardest thing to achieve, is the left-hand side here, the exploration portfolio. Why is that hard? Because, as I said at the beginning, it's a completely different logic. And it's fun to speak after Amy because without the safety to explore, there's no chance you're ever going to see breakthrough in innovation, except if you have a couple of crazy people that might be stupid enough to risk their career and try something that everybody wants to kill. Because in most companies, we don't like risk. And when we make that the core thing, don't take risks, what are people going to do? They're not going to take risks. You tell them to innovate with $100,000 or $1 million, they're going to minimize risk and they're going to play it safe, okay? So what we need to understand is how do we play on this axis of risk? So people actually try out stuff and adapt their ideas constantly and play around with as many ideas as possible. So here, we need to be good at two things. And this is what entrepreneurs, so in the startup world, I think this is being done very well already. In the corporate world, not so good yet. We need to systematically test and adapt our ideas. So the emphasis is not on creativity. Ideas are everywhere. No company has a lack of ideas or smart people. What we lack is the processes here to test. But then there's a second thing that is often missing. The ability to design great business models, or business models that are different, completely different. You're Blockbuster, you rent movies. How do you start imagining online rental all the way to Netflix today, right? Streaming. From the beginning, they had that in their mind. That's exploration of completely new business models. And in most companies, anything new gets killed by the antibodies. So we need to start to get good at this whole idea of exploration. So good examples of this, still, obviously, Amazon is a great example of a company that's world-class at innovation. There are a lot of other things Amazon still needs to do better around sustainability, but they're starting. But when it comes to innovation, world-class. But my favorite example today is actually a Chinese company called Ping An. Who's ever heard of Ping An? It's a great company in the sense of 8 years ago, they were a boring insurance and banking conglomerate. Not a technology company. Boring insurance and banking company. And their founder, Peter Ma, decided they needed to become an internet company, a technology company. So in 8 years, they actually built these two ecosystems, world-class at exploitation, but they built a space where they could explore. And it was clear from the beginning, you're not going to get it right when you start experimenting with AI or blockchain. So just try and fail, learn and adapt. It sounds easy, but you need to create this space. So Jessica Tan was brought in, she was the co-CEO. So Peter Ma gave innovation power. It wasn't just some team in a garage reporting to a person who reports to a person who reports to a person who reports to another person who reports to the senior leadership. That's the state of innovation today. We say garage. But what innovation lacks is power. Power to be at the core of your company, because innovation is about inventing the future. Doesn't that sound like important? Managing the present is actually maybe not as important, because you're managing something that's on the way of dying. So you need to simultaneously invent. Dying seems to be my favorite word the last 2 weeks. Corporate death. Corporate death. Okay, so now, what's the challenge here? And I have some Swiss chocolates and a new book to give away if you get this answer right. But some of you, I know you've seen this maybe already on YouTube or on our blog, so then you can't play this game, okay? So I saw some already. No, I know. So what I want you to think of and discuss with your seat neighbor for about a minute is, if you were, let's take Nestle as an example. Nestle came up 35 years ago with Nespresso. Who's ever had a Nespresso cafe? Okay? That was a breakthrough business model invention for them, but it was 35 years ago. Let's say you are today, in groups of 2, you're the senior leadership of Nestle, Mark-Ulf Schneider, okay? And you need to decide, oh, we want to build another Nestle in our company. How many project teams do we need to invest in to create another breakthrough billion-dollar business? And not just ideas, exploration, but $100,000. In how many teams do you need to invest $100,000 to create one outlier which will become Nespresso, billion-dollar business? So what that means is if you say 10, you're investing $1 million in 10 teams, of which some will fail. That's the second part of the question. I want you to say how many teams will fail. So if you say 10, and you say, okay, of these 10 teams, 5 will completely fail, 4 will make some money, only 1 will be a Nespresso. Make sense? Okay, so I want you to come up with that number. So more specifically, I'll draw this onto our portfolio map. What does this mean? It means you need to figure out how many teams do I invest in here? Is it 10? Is it 100? If you say 100, you're saying we're investing $10 million in 100 teams, early stage. But I also want you to think of how many of those teams are going to die because they explored a stupid idea. Is it 60%? Is it 70%? Sometimes people say, Alex, I think it's 10,000 teams. You do realize when you say 10,000 teams, you're investing $1 billion to create $1 billion, right? Just so we get the math right. Discuss for a minute how many teams do you need to invest in to create one outlier, one Nespresso up here. Let's go. How many will fail and how many will know some success? Let's go. Quick discussion. Okay. Shh. Who wants to play? Only those who don't know the answer, okay? So I'm testing your honesty here. I know it's Swiss chocolate. I know it's our newest book, but testing your honesty. Who wants to play? How many teams? How many teams do you need to invest in? How many? 40, we're only looking at Explore. 40 teams, and how many are going to fail of those 40 teams? 39 are going to fail completely, and 1 is miraculously going to rise, okay? So we're investing $4 million, okay? 40 teams, good. Who has another guess? Yes, how many? 170 will fail, and how many are going to invest in? 171? How many are you going to invest in at the beginning? 100 teams, and 70 are going to fail. Okay, good. That's already pretty bold. You're saying Nestle's going to burn $10 million, actually $7 million. Okay, Swiss conservative company, just, you know. So. Okay, good. 100? Who wants to, another guess, maybe? 25. That sounds more like Nestle, okay. It's probably also why we have no Nespresso anymore, no new case. Anybody else want to guess? I think there's some fear of failure in this room. 20, okay. 335, very precise. No, sorry, I didn't hear that. 35. How many are going to fail? Okay, good. Anything else? Any others? So many of you would be qualified to work for Nestle, but unfortunately, none of you would actually be able to innovate. That was a joke, by the way, just in case you didn't realize, because the real number is, we'll see, I'll show you the statistics, is bigger, and probably a lot bigger, but I can only use the statistics that I have, and they don't come from corporate innovation, they actually come from early stage venture capital. Here, if we look at early stage investments in, of course it makes a difference, but we have to take any statistics that we have. So we're not going to get into the conversation about exactly. But listen. So we can have that conversation during the break if you like. Happy to have it. So here, early stage investments, 6 out of 10 investments, they bomb. Okay? You invest in a team, 60% are not going to be able to pay you the capital back. They're complete failures. That's how entrepreneurship works. And then actually 3 out of 10 only will make some money. That means they can probably pay back your investments, and if you're an investor, they will cover your losses. But you still don't have an outlier, okay? You might get a 1x, 5x return. The outliers is 4 out of 1,000. 4 out of 1,000 will give you a 50x return on your investment, and that might not even be a billion-dollar business, okay? What does that mean? So the only reason I'm showing you this is that these statistics is the closest thing we have, because we have nothing else. But what it does show is in innovation and entrepreneurship, and that's the only message I want to get across, you cannot pick the winner. And if you do think you can pick the winner in innovation, you're delusional. Because you think you're better than an entire venture capital industry, they cannot pick the winner. So what do? They invest in not one idea, in a portfolio. Somebody said it, right? So the problem is, in companies, we don't always have this portfolio approach. That's why we came up with this thing, because you actually need to invest in, I'll give you this number, but you know, we can modify it if we want to. But in this case, if we took these statistics, it's 250 ideas, 162 will fail, 87 will make some money, only 1 out of 250 will be an outlier. So the only message here is that you can't pick the winner. If you're a small or medium-sized company, you're not going to invest in 250, but you need to invest in 4 or 10. But the less teams you invest in, the smaller the return, period. If you need $1 billion return, you don't actually invest $1 billion in one idea. That's the business plan approach. And you know what happens? You're going to take an immense amount of risk and fail. What you need to do is diversify risk, right? So the portfolio approach here is what we're looking at. Now, let me show you at least one company that, we have 2 companies where we have some data on. Amazon, we know how they do it, but we don't necessarily have the data. Take Bosch, taking a European example. Bosch actually has an accelerator program where they invest in 169 teams, but they give them a small amount of money. Actually, I think it's already pretty decent, 120,000 euro to start, and they give them 3 months. That's it. 3 months, not to make a beautiful PowerPoint, but to test their ideas and to bring evidence to the table. That's why we wrote this latest book called Testing Business Ideas, because they know how to test. And it turns out after this first phase, they will eliminate, listen to this, they will eliminate 70% of the teams. And here's the magic thing. Because they told the teams what they need to search for and which evidence they need to show, the teams self-evaluate and don't ask for follow-up investment. So it's not some superior person who's paid more and has a more beautiful business card who makes a decision. It's the evidence. So in innovation, this is really important. In innovation, evidence trumps opinion. Evidence trumps opinion. And that's the safe space you need to create. The evidence speaks, not the highest paid person in the room. In execution, it's slightly different. It'd be good to have this, but experience matters. In innovation experience matters, but not necessarily experience with the old business model, because the world has changed, okay? And then what happens in the last phase, again, they kill 72% of all projects. So what are they creating? An innovation funnel where failure is rewarded. Let me repeat that. Failure is rewarded because the metrics are different from execution. Failure is not the goal, but it's an inevitable side effect of innovation. Without putting the failure at the center of your company, you cannot innovate. So any company that tries to only have operational excellence will kill innovation. And that's the state of many companies. Okay? Make sense? Good. So that's what we need to do. Now, I like Amazon still as an example because you have a CEO at the head of the company that says, we're the best place in the world to fail. How many CEOs do you hear saying that? And he says it not just to anybody, he says it to his shareholders. Because he also says that failure and invention are inseparable twins. So if you're interested in innovation, you want to read the 2015, oh, my timer went off here, sorry. 2015 shareholder letter of Amazon, where he writes to his shareholders why they're so good at innovation. So shareholders can understand why failure is so important. And any company where you don't see failure, I can tell you one thing, you'll never see innovation either. Because you can't have big invention without experimentation. So Amazon is a great example because there's 600,000 people now. So you can't say, oh, it's small companies that can innovate. 600,000 people. And they have a culture of day one. They call this a culture of day one. What is a culture of day one? Always reinvent. Always think you're going to die and stay fresh. Don't get comfortable with success. And at Amazon, they maybe push it. They're actually paranoid that they're going to die all the time, despite being at the top of their game. So let me show you, just very quickly, the 3 types of innovation that they're good at. They do efficiency innovation if you look at their core operations. They have robots in warehouses. Nobody's as efficient in warehouses. So that's a different kind of innovation. Takes a little bit less risk, technology risk. Sustaining innovation. They invented the Kindle. That just helped them stay in the books business, right? That's not breakthrough. It's not going to create a lot new growth, but it did establish themselves. It helped them build a castle in books. But where Amazon, like Ping An, is better than anybody else, they also explore growth innovation. And without psychological safety and the metrics of innovation, you cannot create growth. So Amazon Web Services is not an accident. At Nestle, Nespresso was an accident. Luck led to Nespresso. At Amazon, growth is not a question of luck. It's a question of the culture or the dual culture they put in place. Let me show you a little video. If we can make the sound work, we'll see. Of how he calls day 2. So I told you they want to keep a culture of day 1. Here is what he calls a culture of day 2, where you lean back and relax and you're happy with your established position because you're a great company. This is a culture of day 2.
Okay, I think this one is a very important question. What does day 2 look like? What does day 2 look like? I know the answer to this. Day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death.
Okay, I thought I'll show you a very uplifting video before lunch. But that's the attitude that we actually have in many companies. So we think we're doing the right thing by being operationally excellent, managing the business model we have, but that's not going to get you into the future. So you can't cost cut yourself into the future, okay? Super important. So 2 more things before we go for lunch. We need to give our company innovation guidance. They need to know what's in, what's out. The strategic vision, the culture you want, and how you want to be perceived by the market. Philip Kotler mentioned Fujifilm. They moved from being a film company towards becoming a technology company. That was the direction. We're not doing film anymore. We are a technology company. This gives you innovation guidance. If the leadership doesn't create some guidelines, everything's in and you won't find anything. You need to get everybody to move in the same direction. You need some innovation guidance, okay? Now, what we also need is that different culture. So today, there are a couple of myths in innovation that we still have, which come from the execution culture. People think, I need to find the right idea. Ideas are cheap, ideas are everywhere, and most of them are stupid. But you can't know in advance. People think we need to execute a plan. Not the case in innovation, is the case in execution. They think we can check the results of execution. We can avoid failure. In innovation, you can't, okay? That is the culture of exploit. And that's good in exploit. But what we need is an exploration culture. So I'm going to briefly look at just last thing, and then I'm going to give you a small checklist to assess how innovation ready your culture is. Small tool that we call the culture map to map and design your culture. So if we take innovation culture, if we look at the behaviors, you need to have people who are eager to invent and pioneer. You need to have people who choose innovation as a career path, not because they're crazy, okay? You need to systematically measure, not are we on track with the budget and the timing, but are we reducing the risk of pursuing a stupid idea? That's this drawing of reducing the risk. Why do we want that? Because we're looking for these outcomes. A resilient company, retention of innovation talent. Most innovation talent goes and builds their startup. Why would I stay in an established company? And the biggest one is reduction of risk and uncertainty. And don't mistake R&D for your innovation department. It's not. It's just technology and science. Can help innovation, but innovation is about creating value for customers and your business. That's not what R&D has as a mandate today, unfortunately. So the only thing we can look at, and we're going to do this last little self-assessment if we can start distributing, 3 ways to enable innovation. Leadership support, organizational design, and your innovation practice. How do you do this, okay? So these are the 3 things you need to establish well in your company as enablers, okay? And leadership support, psychological safety would definitely go in all of these, in the first one, but also in the organizational design, and definitely in best-in-class innovation practices, because you will measure the reduction of risk, not are we on plan to be successful, because many innovations will fail. So, have a look at me to the front, don't look at the piece of paper yet. So I gave you an innovation readiness assessment sheet. So I want you, with me, to go through this very quickly. We're going to go through these 3 areas. The first one we're going to look at, you're going to give yourself a score. The first one is leadership support. You're going to score yourself as beginners if you have little experience with the topic I'm going to ask you. Look to the front. Masters if you think you're really good at this. And experts if you are like Amazon and you're used as a case study. Because a lot of people like to label themselves experts, but I've never heard of them as a case study. When I go look, they're still light years away, okay? And some organizations actually underscore themselves. So we're going to look at the 3 first questions. This is why I want you to score. Give yourself a score on strategic guidance for innovation. Do you give your teams strategic guidance on what you want to see in innovation? Types of technologies, types of markets, etc. Second question is resource allocation. Do you have systematic budgets, not for R&D, but to explore new ideas? Is this an institutionalized budget? And the last one, portfolio management. Do you just improve the existing? That's what beginners do. It's not bad, it's good, but that's what beginners do. Or do you explore in 10 ideas, 10 projects if you're an SME? Or if you're the size of Bosch, you should be investing in at least 300 projects. Give yourself a score for your organization, even if you're in academia or government, okay? So this is not just for for-profits. Give yourself a score. Anybody who doesn't score, they don't care about their organization dying. But that's okay, but you're deliberately doing that now. Okay, next one, organizational design. Are we okay? Hands up if you're okay with me going to organizational design. Can I see hands up if you're okay with organizational design? Okay, good. So, we're going to look at these 3 questions. First one, legitimacy and power. Let me be explicit. If you, as the leader or your leader, spends 50% of his or her time on innovation, and your last 3 big important management meetings had innovation as a core part of your agenda, then you can give yourself a 5. If your CEO spends 0 to 5% every week on innovation, you give yourself a 1, okay? Good? Just to frame it. The next one is bridge to the core. Is innovation in your company something that the rebels do? If you call them rebels, then you're at a 1. If you call them the future of your company, then they're a 5. And then the last one, this is important, rewards and incentives here. If you have the same incentives for execution and innovation, you're at a 1. If you have a very specific reward system where you actually reward failure, you're at a 5. Okay? Failure and success, of course. Give yourself a score. If you're sitting with your boss, this might be embarrassing. But it's about being truthful to yourself as an organization. Last one, best-in-class innovation practices. I usually think this is the easiest one. This is the tools and how we do things. So first one, whoops, sorry. Let me go back. Shoot. Here we go. Was this one? First, here, innovation tools. Do you use the tools of innovation? First one. Process management. Do you have different processes for innovation? Very different processes, specific processes with a safe space. And then skills development. Do you have talent? Do you hire innovation talent? Do you hire entrepreneurs in and cultivate innovation talent? Not just bringing people from execution to do innovation. The worst thing is, who's ever heard of this 20% rule? Go do some innovation, on Friday afternoon. Have we ever done that for finance or marketing? No, it's a profession. Well, guess what? Innovation is a profession, or should be. Got your score? Okay, what I want you to do now, for 30 seconds, discuss with your seat neighbor. Did you learn something about your innovation capabilities at your company? 30 seconds, let's go, with your seat neighbor. Okay. I actually didn't give the chocolate away. Who was the closest? Who said 100? Who's saying 100? No? Okay, let's wrap up. This is what we've seen. Let's wrap up. We need to have a portfolio where we exploit and explore. To do that, we need 2 things. We need strategic guidance, and we need specific cultures for innovation, exploration, and exploitation, okay? Now, I want to do a last exercise. It's going to take 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Take your paper, take the assessment sheet, and turn it around and take a pen to write. Everybody, let's go. It's a 20-second exercise. It's going to be very fast. Okay? Ready? Actually, it's even shorter. What I want you to do is take that pen or pencil or marker, and I want you, in 5 seconds, to draw me a small house in 5 seconds. 1, 2, come on, draw. 3, 4, 5. And again, those who are not drawing, they don't give a shit about innovation. Now, what I want you to do is give your house to your seat neighbor. Give your house to your seat neighbor. Don't talk. There's one more exercise. The seat neighbor now decorates the house in 5 seconds, okay? Decorate the house or the surroundings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop. I want you to show the small house to people around you. Show the small house to... Hands up if you drew a house with a pointy roof, a chimney, and a tree beside it. Hands up. Why did you all draw the same thing? Because in your head, you have a mental model. Shh. You all drew the same thing because in your head, you have a mental model. Today, we have a mental model of how to run organizations, tailored to exploit a proven business model. Guess what? Times have changed. And if you want to innovate, you actually need to change the way you draw that little house. It's very hard to unlearn, but if you can't draw a different house, you're going to continue to do what you've been doing so well, and you're going to die with it, okay? So I hope you got something before lunch. My colleague Andy is over there from the Strategyzer team as well if you want to talk about what we do. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you learned something.